Hello, welcome to Animal Audit Corner. And this week I'm doing part 2 of Scientology versus the Mafia. This week I decided to actually bring you part 2 so I can get the story straight on the Mafia and how they operate and how they follow the rules. So, here we go. Around the 1970s, Scientology common status would be classical terrorist group that's unsympathetic within the criminal organization. Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard, who created the organization, was a science fiction writer. Now, Hubbard created Dianetics, the Church of Scientology, which he had operated until his death in 1986. Now, with the Mafia, that criminal organization has not been formed by one man in the lemon groves of Italy in a small island where a group of men called themselves the Mafia had protected the lemon groves that belonged to the modern day aristocrats at that time. As I said in the other story I had about part 1 about the Mafia versus Scientology. These two criminal organizations should be peaceful. Violence should come to the end, and Mafia immigrated here in the United States, it would be Giuseppe Esposito. He escaped Italy to avoid authorities when he killed Vice Chancellor. Proves he would be caught in New Orleans and was deported back to Italy. That would create a whole new illegal enterprise in the United States by Al Capone and Salvatore Mazzini. Sales of alcohol, both New York and the Chicago outfit had their hands in a 10 years later, in the 1950s, Scientology fiction writer, as you know, as L. Ron Hubbard, created Dianetics, the model health, in 1950. Then he would open up the Church of Scientology in February 18th, 1954 in California, in the city of Los Angeles. He would also be open an org all over the world, including London, where he purchased St. Hill. And Scientology would first get their tax exempt status in 1957. Then Hubbard would purchase a boat and call it the Fleet and form the Sea Org in 1960s. Scientology always sequestered people in a small room and has 200 questions on one paper that they have to. All the Scientologists would be called the Oxford Cat Alliance, or OCA, created by Oxford, but wasn't. That's what Scientology claimed when they came up with the concept. Now, there's no evidence saying that it's true. Then people would take a 30-minute activity, but usually no one wants to take those tests. But if you're a Scientologist, you had to. And it wasn't a choice that people made. The aptitude test, they would take an examination. After the range of Scientologists technically teaching claims to have a great numerical improvement, but it really doesn't. And there's no evidence showing otherwise. That's what Scientology claims that they would have. And they would tell people that they have a horrible response to mental activity, whatever, that is so terrible that they had a terrible reflex problem. That's what they tell them, so they can fork over more money for auditing, which they had to take. That would only saving races. This whole issue would be so bad. The Scientologists concept that they have would make their slave labor working for just the pennies. They would start at 13 cents an hour and go straight up to 75, but then it would drop back down to 13 cents, according to Sandy McKenna. And yeah, according to Sandy McKenna. I forgot the name of the show. All right. The Mafia's daily operation would be having illicit activities that would be extortion along with fraud. Then after the laundering, the money they take it back to the boss. Then the boss shares it with everybody. Now the thing is, that's not what David Miscavige does. Because if he were to do that in the Mafia, that's it. There's a trunk of a car that would have his name on it. They do not let people do that. And if the boss does that, the commission would know about it. Loan sharks, illegal gambling, and they would go infiltrate legitimate businesses, also of using them as fronts, like construction companies, trucking companies, and restaurants to launder money. Scientology does not have any kind of rule book, but they depend on several variety of doctrines and codes that they will use within the organization. Criminal organization. And you know what? Scientology keeps sugarcoating it. They would also have a code of honor that they constantly follow all. They would also use the audit code that's also goes by an auditor's rules as well. So there's a whole page of rules for the auditor. Now, they have the rules of no attacking Scientology, even though they are the ones doing the attacking. As you recalled yesterday, I told you that Confident Chris was attacked right by the Scientology building, where OSA paid a homeless guy or street person to beat Chris up. Now, that's what they use their tax-exempt status. They use it to go hire private investigators, pay street people to go beat up protesters or journalists, and hire high-priced attorneys. And they also use their money for campaign contributions when there's an election. That organization also has restriction or drug and alcohol. That organization also has restrictions like alcohol through. Oh no, the organization would restrict prescription or drugs and alcohol through prescription or any kind of antibiotics, meaning they don't even accept healing medications. And they always take everything into their own hands. They take it upon themselves to just play doctor. Scientology have very high standards that can lead in internal justice and ethics. Now, what does ethics mean to them? They're not ethical whatsoever. So what does that word mean to them? Now, the rules of the Mafia, you cannot have any connection to law enforcement. Scientology has the LAPD on speed dial. Now, do they have the Clearwater Police on speed dial? I don't know. But when you're in the mafia, that is off limits. You're not even to have fundraisers for them. Scientology does it all together. Now, the reason why I'm having this in the first place is because people think, okay, granted, the mafia boss called guru are similar because they're seen upon as gods, but it just stops right there. They operate differently. People think they operate the same way. Scientology operates the same way as the mom. They are. Now, I'm not going to name any names. I'm not going to call them a liar. They're just accidentally giving people wrong in. And this is not the way mafia operates. Everyone in Costa Nostra has to respect one another. Scientology does not do that. They respect diddly squat because you cannot have your hands on another made man. Scientology does that all the time. And they take orders from David Miscavige to go out and beat up other people. If he were to do it in La Costa Nostra, he would be dead by now. So when you hear one of the advocates say they have the same tactics as the mafia, no, it's not. Research first before saying anything. You cannot just do half of it. You have to do all of it. Now, I'm not going to name or squeezing money out of another made man. Scientology does that all the time, including David Miscavige. He makes sure they squeeze money out of members. You cannot do that in La Costa Nostra or Mafia. If you do that, you'll be dead the next day. When you are in La Costa Nostra, you are not to support or you're not supposed to buy or sell drugs. Somewhere, well, actually, Angelo Bruno called a ban on drugs. He made sure his inner circle didn't sell it. He did at one time sell it, but then he realized it's causing a problem and it attracts so much attention. So he then called a boycott. Always have loyalty and always be available, meaning if they call you, you always be there when the code of silence. Well, according to Dominic Sicali, well, the code of silence is gone. It no longer exists. Because according to Dominic Sicali, it's a new day and age, and they don't use the code of silence anymore, which is omerta. But guess what? They probably have something else in place of that. At the Scientology will never make any kind of changes because Hubbard said not to make any changes. And of course, guess what? Because the internet's around, they're not making any changes because L. Ron Hubbard told them not to. Guess what? Mafia sees if there's technology around, then they might change a few words, few rules. But however, they do it because of tech. Because now we have the internet. And of course, they don't want to get caught. So it would cause them to soften up. According to Dominic Sigali, the mob has gotten soft now. Guess what? If I was a criminal in that organization, I would soften up due to the internet. But you know what? They don't have any women. Well, they pop up every now and then, but it's usually male based. That's okay because guess what? Us women are better off. So Dominic Sigali mentioned, like I just said, he did mention Omerta, but I just said it. It's gone. It's no longer used. Just repeated myself. Even though there might be changes in La Cosa Nostra, guys are not, the guys in that industry or whatever it is they call it, are not going to say anything because guess what? They are criminals. Criminals don't. But then, all in all, things still change a little bit since prohibition with sales of alcohol, both in New York and the Chicago, with their hands in illegal alcohol back in the 1930s. However, even though the rules of no attacking in Scientology, there would be no attacking in Scientology, even though they do the attacking. They think they don't, but they do. And nevertheless, everyone in Cosa Nostra has to respect one another. We're saying Scientology doesn't respect anyone whatsoever. And they also hurt innocent people. In conclusion, those two organizations are still criminal organizations. Even though Hollywood is making them look good, which in the case, they're not so great. And today, Dominic Sigali has his own YouTube channel to convince kids and young boys that the street is just no place for them. It's a rough world out there. And he wants to make sure that the kids go pro and not get themselves into trouble, which is a realistic concept. But however, guess David Miscavige is a bad influence. He thinks he's a god. Now, these stories that we tell, well, I told this story because everybody is mixed up on what Scientology does and what La Cosa Nostra does. And then the other reason why I did this story over again is because before Dominic Sikeli mentioned that they don't use omerta anymore, I brought it up in the first Scientology versus. All right. So, guess what? I hope you're supporting Laura and her quest to get her dad back. And we're going to help her. Go to the hate site where they have Phil Anderson hate speech, which I'll give him a little credit for because it's so subtle, and give it a thumbs down. Supporting Laura on the quest of getting her dad back. And Liz is on the same quest too. Of course, I should see what else is there. Is Aaron going to trial? Well, I mentioned this several times already. I don't think so. Because I don't think the DA wants to waste their time with this. But he wants his day in court. He wants to embarrass Scientology, and who can blame him? Let's see. And tomorrow, I'm going to try and bring you a story of Claire and growing up in polygamy. And isn't that wild? Sam is one of 35 kids. Now, Celine Dion is the youngest of 14. 35 makes her family look like a small crowd. Isn't that something? So, what else is. Well, let me think. I think that might do it for today. Now, buy me a coffee. Go to the link, buy me a coffee, then hit the like, press subscribe. And I'm definitely going to see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.